Sarah Martinez had always been different from the other recruits at Fort Bragg. While her fellow soldiers came from military families or had grown up around guns, Sarah came from a small farming town in Ohio, where the closest she had come to firearms was helping her father scare crows away from the cornfields with an old shotgun. But what she lacked in experience, she made up for with an unwavering determination that had carried her through basic training and into the elite Special Operations training program. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training facility as Sarah approached the weapons requisition office. Her boots clicked against the concrete floor with purpose, each step echoing her resolve. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying weapon specifications late into the night while her bunkmates slept. The other recruits had already made their selections days ago, choosing familiar weapons that matched their backgrounds and preferences. Sarah, however, had something very specific in mind. Sergeant Thompson looked up from his paperwork as she entered the small, cramped office, lined with locked gun cabinets and ammunition storage. His weathered face showed the kind of skepticism that had become all too familiar to Sarah over the past months. Thompson had been running weapons requisitions for over 15 years, and he prided himself on knowing exactly what each soldier needed before they even asked. "Martinez, right?" Thompson's voice carried the gruff tone of someone who had dealt with countless overconfident recruits. "Let me guess. You want something standard. Maybe an M4 carbine like most of the others picked. Nice, reliable, nothing fancy." Sarah straightened her shoulders and met his gaze directly. "Actually, Sergeant, I was hoping to request the Barrett M82A1 sniper rifle." The room fell silent, except for the distant sound of training exercises outside. Thompson's pen stopped moving across his clipboard, and he slowly raised his eyes to study the young woman standing before him. At barely 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing no more than 120 pounds, Sarah looked more like she belonged in a college library than handling one of the military's most powerful sniper rifles. "The Barrett?" Thompson's voice carried a mix of disbelief and amusement. "Kid, do you have any idea what you just asked for? That's a 50 caliber anti-material rifle. It weighs nearly 30 pounds and has a recoil that can knock a grown man flat on his back. It's not exactly what I'd call beginner-friendly." Sarah had expected this reaction, but it still stung. She had researched the weapon extensively, studied its specifications, and even watched countless training videos. She knew the challenges it presented, but she also knew it was exactly what she needed to prove herself in the specialized role she was training for. "I understand the specifications, Sergeant. I've done my homework. The Barrett has an effective range of over a mile, and the training scenarios we'll be running next month require long-distance precision shooting. I believe it's the right tool for the mission." Thompson chuckled and shook his head, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. "Martinez, I've seen plenty of recruits come through here thinking they're the next Carlos Hathcock. Most of them can't even handle the kick from a standard sniper rifle, let alone something like the Barrett. Why don't you start with something more reasonable, like a Remington 700? Work your way up to the big guns." Before Sarah could respond, 2 other soldiers entered the office behind her. Private Jackson and Corporal Williams had been part of her training group since day 1, and both had made no secret of their doubts about her abilities. Jackson, a tall, muscular man from Texas, had grown up hunting and had been shooting since he was 8 years old. Williams came from a military family and had been handling weapons since before Sarah had even considered joining the Army. "Did I just hear Martinez asking for a Barrett?" Jackson's voice dripped with mock surprise. "Sarge, you might want to make sure the medical team is standing by. That little pop gun is going to send her flying clear across the range." Williams joined in with a laugh that felt more cruel than friendly. "Come on, Sarah, be realistic. The Barrett isn't a toy. It's a serious weapon that requires serious strength and experience. Maybe try something more your speed, like a BB gun." The mocking laughter filled the small office, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and frustration. She had worked twice as hard as anyone else to get to this point, pushing herself through grueling physical training and studying military tactics until her eyes burned. She had outscored both Jackson and Williams in marksmanship with standard rifles, but apparently that meant nothing when it came to their perception of her capabilities. "I can handle it," Sarah said firmly, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. "I've qualified expert on every weapon we've trained with so far. My scores speak for themselves." "Scores with pea shooters," Jackson scoffed. "The Barrett is in a completely different league. You need upper body strength that you just don't have. No offense, but facts are facts." Sergeant Thompson seemed to be enjoying the exchange, nodding along with the male soldier's comments. "The boys have a point, Martinez. The Barrett isn't just about accuracy. It's about physical capability. You need to be able to carry that weapon across miles of rough terrain, set it up quickly under pressure, and absorb the recoil shot after shot without losing your target. It's not something you can just will yourself through." Sarah felt the familiar frustration that had followed her throughout her military career. No matter what she accomplished, no matter how hard she worked or how well she performed, there was always someone ready to tell her she wasn't cut out for the job. She had heard the whispers during basic training about how women didn't belong in combat roles, how they were too weak, too emotional, too unreliable when things got tough. "I understand your concerns," Sarah said, keeping her voice professional despite the storm of emotions inside her. "But I'm asking for the opportunity to prove myself. Give me a chance to demonstrate that I can handle the weapon safely and effectively." Williams crossed his arms and leaned against the doorframe. "Sarah, it's not about giving you a chance. It's about reality. That rifle has taken down helicopters and armored vehicles. The recoil alone could seriously injure you if you're not prepared for it. We're trying to look out for you here." The condescending tone in Williams's voice was the last straw. Sarah had been looked out for her entire military career by men who assumed she needed protection rather than opportunity. She had proven herself again and again, only to face the same patronizing attitudes at every turn. "I appreciate the concern," Sarah replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. "But I'm not asking for protection. I'm asking for equipment. Either I qualify for it or I don't. Either I can handle it or I can't. But I should get the same opportunity to try that anyone else would." Thompson was about to respond when footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. The conversation died as Commander Hayes appeared in the doorway, his presence immediately changing the atmosphere in the room. Hayes was a legend at Fort Bragg, a man whose reputation preceded him into every room he entered. He had served multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, had been awarded the Bronze Star twice, and was known throughout the special operations community for his tactical brilliance and unwavering fairness. "What's all the commotion about?" Hayes asked, his sharp eyes taking in the scene before him. At 6 feet 2 inches, with graying hair and piercing blue eyes, the commander had a presence that commanded immediate respect. "Sir," Thompson straightened up quickly. "Private Martinez here is requesting a Barrett M82A1 for the upcoming training exercise. I was just explaining why that might not be the most appropriate choice for someone of her experience level." Hayes stepped further into the room, and Sarah could feel his attention focus on her. She had heard stories about the commander's ability to size up a soldier with just a glance, to see potential that others missed and spot weaknesses that weren't obvious. Under his steady gaze, she felt exposed, but not intimidated. "Martinez," Hayes said, his voice carrying the authority of years of command. "What's your reasoning for wanting the Barrett?" Sarah took a deep breath, knowing this might be her only chance to make her case to someone who might actually listen. "Sir, the upcoming training scenarios involve long-range reconnaissance and elimination of high-value targets at distances exceeding 800 meters. The Barrett's range and stopping power make it the optimal weapon for those missions. Additionally, I believe my smaller frame might actually be an advantage in terms of concealment and mobility once the weapon is in position. Hayes nodded slowly, considering her words. And you believe you can handle the physical demands of operating such a weapon? I do, sir. I understand the challenges, but I'm confident in my abilities. I've consistently outperformed expectations in training, and I'm willing to put in whatever additional preparation time is necessary. The room remained silent as Hayes considered her request. Jackson and Williams exchanged glances, clearly expecting the commander to side with Thompson's assessment. Sarah held her breath, knowing that this moment could define the trajectory of her entire military career. Finally, Hayes turned to Thompson with an expression that was unreadable. "Sergeant, what weapons do we currently have available for requisition?" Thompson consulted his clipboard nervously. "Well, sir, we have several M4 carbines, a few Remington 700s, some M249 light machine guns, and—" He paused, flipping through pages. "We do have one Barrett M82A1 in inventory, but it's never been issued to a trainee before." "I see," Hayes said quietly, his eyes moving between Sarah and the other soldiers in the room. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, and Sarah could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Everything she had worked for, every hour of training and study, had led to this moment. What happened next would change everything, though none of them knew it at the time. The decision made in that small weapons office would ripple through the special operations community and ultimately save lives in ways that no one could have predicted. But for now, all that mattered was the next words that would come from Commander Hayes's mouth, words that would either validate Sarah's determination or confirm her critics' doubts about her place in the military. Commander Hayes studied Sarah's face for a long moment, as if searching for something in her expression. The weight of his gaze felt heavier than any weapon she had ever carried, and she forced herself to maintain eye contact despite the nervous energy coursing through her body. Around them, the tension in the small office was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Thompson," Hayes said finally, his voice calm but carrying an undertone that made everyone in the room pay attention. "I want you to prepare something special for Private Martinez." Thompson looked confused, glancing down at his clipboard again. "Sir, about the Barrett request?" Hayes held up a hand to stop him. "Not the Barrett, Sergeant. Something else entirely." He leaned closer to Thompson and spoke in a voice so low that Sarah had to strain to hear it. "Give her the Black Talon." The effect of those words was immediate and dramatic. Thompson's clipboard clattered to the floor, and his face went pale. Jackson and Williams exchanged bewildered glances, clearly having never heard the name before. But Thompson's reaction told Sarah that whatever the Black Talon was, it was significant. "Sir," Thompson's voice was barely above a whisper, "are you certain?" "The Black Talon hasn't been issued to anyone in over 3 years. Command specifically restricted access to that weapon after the incident in Syria," Hayes finished. "I'm well aware of the restrictions, Sergeant. I'm also well aware of what that weapon is capable of in the right hands." His eyes never left Sarah's face as he spoke. "The question is whether Private Martinez here might just be those right hands." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Whatever the Black Talon was, it clearly carried a history that made even experienced soldiers nervous. The way Hayes spoke about it suggested it was far more than just another rifle, and Thompson's reaction indicated it came with serious risks. "What exactly is the Black Talon?" Sarah asked, her curiosity overriding her caution. Hayes smiled for the first time since entering the office, but it wasn't entirely reassuring. "That, Private, is something you'll discover soon enough. Thompson, I want the Black Talon prepared and delivered to Range 7 by Aero 800 tomorrow. Private Martinez will begin specialized training immediately." "Sir?" Williams interrupted, clearly frustrated by being left out of the conversation. "What about the rest of us?" We're supposed to be training as a unit for the upcoming exercise. Hayes turned his attention to the other soldiers, and Sarah could see them shrink slightly under his gaze. You'll continue with standard weapons training as scheduled. Private Martinez will be conducting separate specialized training for the next 2 weeks. If she successfully completes that training, she'll rejoin the unit with her assigned weapon. If not, he let the sentence hang in the air ominously. Jackson couldn't contain his skepticism any longer. Sir, with all due respect, if Martinez can't handle a standard sniper rifle, how is she going to manage something that sounds even more challenging? The commander's expression hardened, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded troops in the world's most dangerous places. Private Jackson, your concern is noted and dismissed. Private Martinez's training records speak for themselves. She has consistently exceeded performance standards across multiple disciplines. Perhaps instead of worrying about her capabilities, you should focus on improving your own. The rebuke hit Jackson like a physical blow, and he stepped back, his face flushing red with embarrassment. Williams wisely chose to remain silent, sensing that the commander's patience with their attitudes was wearing thin. Thompson, Hayes continued, I want you to set up a meeting with Master Sergeant Rodriguez for tomorrow at 0600. He'll be overseeing Private Martinez's specialized training program. At the mention of Rodriguez's name, Thompson's expression grew even more serious. Master Sergeant Rodriguez was a legend in special operations circles, a man who had trained some of the military's most elite snipers. If he was being brought in for Sarah's training, it meant whatever she was about to undertake was far beyond normal protocols. Yes, sir, Thompson replied, his voice still shaky. I'll make the arrangements immediately. Hayes nodded and then turned back to Sarah. Private Martinez, you requested an opportunity to prove yourself. You're about to get exactly that, though I suspect it will be far more challenging than anything you originally envisioned. Are you prepared for that? Sarah straightened her shoulders and met his gaze directly. Yes, sir. I'm ready for whatever training is required. We'll see about that, Hayes said with a slight smile. Report to Range 7 at 800 sharp tomorrow morning. Come prepared for an extended training session and bring your medical clearance forms. You're going to need them. As Hayes turned to leave the office, he paused at the doorway and looked back at the group. Gentlemen, I suggest you use this time to focus on your own preparation for the upcoming exercise. Something tells me Private Martinez is going to surprise all of you. With that, he disappeared into the hallway, leaving behind a stunned silence. Thompson immediately began gathering paperwork from his desk, his hands shaking slightly as he organized files. Martinez, I need you to sign these requisition forms, and you'll need to complete additional safety certifications before tomorrow. As Sarah signed the documents, she noticed Thompson's nervousness hadn't subsided since Hayes left. Sergeant, can you tell me anything about what I'm getting into? Thompson looked around to make sure Jackson and Williams had left before answering. Listen, Martinez, I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I've never seen Commander Hayes authorize something like this. The Black Talon isn't just a weapon, it's something else entirely. The last person who trained with it was Captain Morrison. And that was right before his deployment to Syria. What happened in Syria? Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Morrison was part of a deep reconnaissance mission that went sideways. He used the Black Talon to eliminate multiple high-value targets from extreme distances, probably saved his entire unit from being overrun. But the weapon, it did things that standard ballistics shouldn't allow. Command classified the entire incident and restricted access to the weapon immediately afterward. Sarah felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. So why would Commander Hayes authorize it for training now? Thompson shook his head. That's above my pay grade, kid, but I'll tell you this much. If Hayes thinks you can handle it, then you've got potential that the rest of us haven't recognized. The commander doesn't make decisions like this lightly. That evening, Sarah lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling while her fellow trainees slept around her. She had tried to research the Black Talon using the base's computer system, but every search came up empty. Whatever information existed about the weapon was clearly classified beyond her security level. The mystery only added to her anxiety about the next morning's training session. Master Sergeant Rodriguez was waiting for her when she arrived at Range 7 at exactly 800. The range was unlike any training facility Sarah had used before. It was isolated from the main base, surrounded by high-security fencing and equipped with targets that extended far beyond the normal maximum range markers. Rodriguez himself was an imposing figure, standing well over 6 feet tall with the kind of weathered appearance that came from decades of field operations. His reputation preceded him throughout the special operations community, and Sarah felt honored and intimidated in equal measure to be training under his supervision. Private Martinez. Rodriguez's voice carried a slight accent that hinted at his Puerto Rican heritage. Commander Hayes tells me you've requested specialized sniper training. Before we begin, I need to understand your motivation. Why are you here? Sarah had practiced her answer during the sleepless night, but standing before Rodriguez, the words came from a deeper place than preparation. Sergeant, I'm here because I believe I can contribute to our mission effectiveness in ways that might not be obvious to others. I'm tired of being underestimated, and I'm ready to prove that I belong here. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Good answer. Now let me be clear about what you're undertaking. The weapon you'll be training with isn't like anything else in our arsenal. It requires not just marksmanship skills, but mental discipline, physical endurance, and the ability to handle technology that pushes the boundaries of current military capabilities. He led her to a reinforced bunker at one end of the range, where a locked case sat on a metal table. The case was larger than Sarah had expected, made of what appeared to be specially designed materials that looked both lightweight and incredibly durable. The Black Talon, Rodriguez said as he began entering a complex code into the case's electronic lock, was developed as part of a classified project 3 years ago. It combines advanced materials science with cutting-edge optics and ballistics technology. Only 12 of these weapons were ever manufactured, and this is one of only 3 remaining in service. As the case opened, Sarah caught her first glimpse of the Black Talon, and it took her breath away. The weapon was unlike any rifle she had ever seen, with a sleek, almost futuristic design that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The barrel was longer than a standard sniper rifle, but the overall weight appeared to be distributed in a way that would make it surprisingly manageable despite its size. The effective range extends well beyond 2 miles under optimal conditions, Rodriguez continued, and the ballistic computer integrated into the scope can calculate wind resistance, humidity, temperature variations, and even target movement patterns in real time. But the most remarkable feature is its recoil management system. Despite firing a specialized .50 caliber round, the felt recoil is actually less than most standard sniper rifles. Sarah stared at the weapon in amazement. How is that possible? Advanced materials and engineering that I'm not qualified to explain, Rodriguez admitted. What I can tell you is that it works, but only in the hands of someone who can handle the mental demands of operating such sophisticated equipment while maintaining the fundamental marksmanship skills that make a great sniper. Over the following days, Sarah immersed herself in the most intensive training of her life. Rodriguez pushed her through scenarios that tested not only her shooting ability, but her problem-solving skills, her ability to remain calm under extreme pressure, and her capacity to integrate technology with intuition. The Black Talon felt like an extension of her body in ways that surprised both her and Rodriguez. Where other soldiers had struggled with the weapon's advanced systems, Sarah seemed to develop an almost instinctive understanding of its capabilities. Her shots consistently found their targets at distances that should have been impossible for someone with her experience level. But the real test was yet to come, and both Sarah and Rodriguez knew that all their preparation would mean nothing if she couldn't perform when it truly mattered. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood at the edge of Range 7 as dawn broke over the mountains, the black Talon secured in its specialized carrying case beside her. Master Sergeant Rodriguez had spent the previous evening going over final preparations for what he called her graduation exercise, though Sarah suspected there was more to today's events than a simple training evaluation. The radio clipped to Rodriguez's vest crackled to life, and Commander Hayes's voice came through with unusual urgency. "Rodriguez, we have a situation developing. I need you and Martinez in the briefing room immediately. This is not a drill." Sarah felt her stomach drop. In her 2 weeks of intensive training, she had become accustomed to the controlled environment of the range, where mistakes meant missed targets rather than lost lives. The tone in Hayes's voice suggested that her training was about to become very real, very quickly. 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself in a briefing room filled with some of the most elite soldiers on the base. Maps covered every wall, satellite images were spread across tables, and multiple computer screens displayed real-time intelligence feeds. The atmosphere was tense with the kind of focused energy that preceded high-stakes operations. Commander Hayes stood at the front of the room, his expression grim. "Ladies and gentlemen, 3 hours ago, we received intelligence about a hostage situation developing in the mountains approximately 40 miles north of our position. A group of international aid workers, including 2 American citizens, are being held by a terrorist cell that has been operating in the region for the past 6 months. Sarah's training partners, Jackson and Williams, were present along with several other soldiers she recognized from advanced training programs. Their earlier mockery seemed like a distant memory as they focused on the serious nature of the briefing. The terrorists are holed up in an abandoned mining facility on a ridge approximately 2,800 feet above the surrounding valley," Hayes continued, activating a large display screen that showed detailed satellite imagery of the target location. "Standard assault approaches are impossible due to the terrain, and the facility's position gives the terrorists a commanding view of any approaching forces." The images showed a complex of buildings perched on what appeared to be an almost inaccessible mountain ledge. The single-access road was clearly visible, winding up the mountainside in a series of switchbacks that would leave any approaching force completely exposed to observation and fire from above. "Intelligence suggests there are at least 12 hostiles, armed with military-grade weapons and possibly explosives. They've demonstrated their willingness to kill hostages if threatened, as evidenced by radio communications intercepted 2 hours ago." Hayes's voice carried the weight of lives hanging in the balance. Sarah studied the satellite images, her mind automatically calculating distances and angles of approach. During her training with the Black Talon, Rodriguez had emphasized the importance of visualizing complex shooting scenarios, and she found herself mentally mapping potential sniper positions around the target area. "Sir," Jackson raised his hand, "what's our operational timeline?" "The terrorists have given us until sunset to meet their demands, which include prisoner releases that are impossible for us to arrange," Hayes replied. "That gives us approximately 8 hours to resolve this situation. However, weather reports indicate a storm system moving in that will severely limit visibility after 1,400 hours. Effectively, we have about 4 hours to execute any rescue operation." Williams leaned forward in his chair. "What kind of support assets do we have available?" "Limited," Hayes said bluntly. "The remote location and political sensitivities surrounding this operation mean we're working with minimal resources. No air support, no artillery, no backup from regional forces. This needs to be a surgical operation with a small team and minimal footprint." Sarah's heart was pounding as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't a training exercise or a theoretical scenario from a classroom. Real people's lives hung in the balance, and the decisions made in this room would determine whether they lived or died. Hayes activated another display showing detailed topographical maps of the area. The only viable approach requires a three-man team to infiltrate on foot through this canyon system. He indicated a narrow valley that approached the target from the west. The challenge is that the final phase of the approach leaves the team exposed across approximately 400 meters of open ground before reaching effective assault range. Sarah studied the maps and realized the tactical problem immediately. Any assault team would be completely vulnerable while crossing that open area, well within range of defensive positions in the mining facility. It was exactly the kind of scenario that required overwatch support from an extreme distance. The terrorists will have clear fields of fire across that entire approach, Rodriguez observed, voicing what Sarah was thinking. An assault team would need sniper support to neutralize the observation posts and defensive positions before they could advance. Hayes nodded grimly. That's exactly right, Master Sergeant. And that's where we run into our biggest problem. The only positions that offer sight lines to the target facility are on this ridge system approximately 200 meters away. That distance is beyond the effective range of our standard sniper weapons, especially with the wind conditions expected in the mountains today. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she realized why she was in this briefing. The Black Talon was designed for exactly this kind of extreme-range engagement, and her training over the past 2 weeks had focused extensively on long-distance shooting in challenging conditions. "Sir," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt, "what about using the Black Talon for overwatch support?" Several heads turned toward her, and she could see surprise on the faces of her fellow soldiers. Jackson and Williams exchanged glances, clearly remembering their mockery of her weapon request just 2 weeks earlier. Hayes studied her for a long moment before responding. "Private Martinez, that's precisely what we're considering. The question is whether you're ready for an operational deployment of that weapon system under these conditions." Rodriguez spoke up from beside her. "Commander, Private Martinez has exceeded every benchmark we've established for the Black Talon system. Her accuracy at extended ranges is remarkable, and she's demonstrated the mental discipline required to operate under pressure. If anyone can make this shot work, it's her." Sarah felt a surge of gratitude toward Rodriguez, whose confidence in her abilities meant everything in this moment. But she also understood the enormous responsibility being placed on her shoulders. If she failed, the assault team would be walking into a death trap. "The mission profile would be as follows," Hayes continued, bringing up a new display. "Martinez would be inserted via helicopter at this landing zone approximately 5 miles from the overwatch position. She'd then move on foot to establish a shooting position on this ridge, designated Point Alpha. From there, she'd provide overwatch support for the assault team, engaging defensive positions and observation posts as identified." The scope of the mission was daunting. Sarah would be operating alone, far from any support, with the lives of both hostages and the assault team depending on her marksmanship. The distance involved was at the very edge of what was considered possible, even with the Black Talon's advanced capabilities. "What kind of targets are we talking about?" Sarah asked, forcing herself to focus on the tactical details rather than the pressure. Hayes zoomed in on the satellite images of the mining facility. "Intelligence indicates at least 3 observation posts positioned around the perimeter of the complex. Each post is likely manned by 2 to 3 hostiles with automatic weapons and possibly crew-served weapons. Your primary targets would be the personnel manning those positions." Sarah studied the images carefully, noting the positions of the buildings and the likely fields of fire from each observation post. The shots would be challenging not just because of the distance, but because of the need to engage multiple targets in rapid succession without being detected. "Timeline for the operation?" she asked. "Insertion at 1,000 hours, movement to position by 11:30, commence overwatch at 1200 when the assault team begins their approach. Weather window closes at 1400, so everything needs to be completed by then." Sarah nodded. her mind already running through the preparations she would need to make. Equipment checks, ammunition selection, weather data analysis, route planning. Every detail would be critical to mission success. I'll need current weather data for the target area, including wind speed and direction at various altitudes, she said. Also detailed intelligence on the exact positions of the observation posts and any other defensive positions that might threaten the assault team. Hayes smiled slightly. Rodriguez said you'd ask for those specifics. The intelligence package is already being prepared. You'll have everything you need before insertion. Jackson raised his hand tentatively. Sir, will Private Martinez be operating alone for Overwatch? That's correct, Hayes replied. The insertion helicopter can only carry so much weight given the altitude and weather conditions. Martinez will be inserted with her weapon system and essential equipment only. No spotter, no backup, no extraction until mission completion. The weight of that responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders like a physical burden. She would be entirely alone on that mountain, with no one to rely on except herself and her training. If something went wrong, if she missed a critical shot or failed to identify a threat, people would die. Private Martinez, Hayes said, his voice carrying the gravity of command, I need to know right now if you're prepared to accept this mission. There's no shame in saying you're not ready. This is beyond anything in your training experience, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Sarah took a deep breath. Thinking about the past 2 weeks of intensive training, the confidence Rodriguez had shown in her abilities, and the mocking voices of those who had doubted her from the beginning. More importantly, she thought about the hostages whose lives hung in the balance and the assault team members who would be counting on her to keep them alive. Yes, sir, she said firmly. I'm ready. Hayes nodded. Then let's get you equipped and briefed. You insert in 90 minutes. The next hour passed in a blur of equipment checks and final preparations. Sarah methodically went through every component of the Black Talon system, verifying its calibration and loading the specialized ammunition she would need. Rodriguez stayed beside her throughout the process, offering last-minute advice and encouragement. Remember everything we've practiced, he said as she secured the weapon in its carrying case. Trust your training, trust the equipment, and trust yourself. You've got this. As the helicopter lifted off toward the mountains, Sarah watched the base grow smaller below her and tried to calm her racing heart. In a few hours, she would either prove herself as one of the military's most elite marksmen, or she would fail in front of everyone who had ever doubted her abilities. But as the Black Talon's case rested securely beside her, Sarah realized that for the first time since joining the military, she wasn't thinking about proving herself to her critics. She was thinking about bringing everyone home safely, and she knew she had the skills and equipment to make that happen. The real test of her abilities was about to begin, and Sarah Martinez was ready for it.